Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. So, what exactly makes someone an American? It's a question we hear debated constantly, right? Well, today, we're cutting through all that noise. We're going to bridge modern sociological data with literally tens of thousands of years of history to uncover the true, deeply complex roots of American identity. It's like a giant puzzle, and we're about to put the pieces together.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap. First, defining American identity. Second, the first inhabitants. Third, the rise of complex societies. Fourth, early European colonization. And finally, a multi-creedal modern nation.
All right, Section 1, defining American identity, the constitutive norms.
Now, you might be wondering where to even begin with this. Researcher Deborah J. Schildkraut tackled a pretty massive question. Is increasing ethnic diversity changing how we define being American? And it all centers around that core, seemingly simple question, what makes an American? When sociologists try to measure these constitutive norms, the shared rules and beliefs of belonging to a group, they find you absolutely cannot reduce it down to a single trait. It's incredibly complex. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the multiple traditions theory. Schildkraut's empirical research proves that an increasingly multicultural America actually thrives on a broad, complex, and honestly sometimes contradictory set of norms. To really understand why our identity is built on these overlapping multiple traditions, we have to rewind the clock, way back. Moving on to Section 2, the first inhabitants, tens of thousands of years of history. To truly grasp these American traditions, we've got to start about 30,000 years ago, with migrations across the Beringia land bridge. By 10,000 BCE, humans were well established across North America, hunting Ice Age megafauna. And as the climate shifted, well, they adapted. We see the first farming in central Mexico around 8,000 BCE, and distinct groups, like the Na-Dene-speaking peoples, reaching the Pacific Northwest by 5,000 BCE. So long before any European contact, these early populations had already diversified into hundreds of culturally distinct groups. Let's move to and see how this builds in Section 3, Rise of Complex Societies. Diverse pre-Columbian cultures. Now, this totally shatters the myth of some homogeneous, one-size-fits-all pre-Columbian America. Just look at the contrast. On one hand, indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest built permanent villages, relied heavily on salmon, and held these lavish, wealth-distributing feasts called potlatches. On the other hand, you've got the Mississippian culture spanning the Southeast and Midwest. They relied on massive agriculture and built towering earthwork mounds. Two completely different ways of life, highlighting a rich, overlapping tapestry of distinct traditions. To put the sheer scale of these complex societies into perspective, 20,000. That was the estimated population of the Mississippian city of Cahokia at its absolute peak in the 12th century. Think about that for a second. Cahokia was larger than the population of London at that exact same time in history. No way, right? They had highly structured classes and built Monk's Mound, a massive earthwork structure standing 100 feet tall. And it wasn't just physical structures. Political complexity was thriving, too. Up in present-day upstate New York, the Iroquois formed a highly sophisticated confederation in the mid-15th century. It united 5 founding tribes, the Oneida, the Mohawk, the Onondaga, the Cayuga, and the Seneca. Governed by 50 representative sachem chiefs, this was a deeply organized, powerful political entity with democratic practices established centuries ago. These settlements were incredibly widespread, too. You had the Anasazi constructing massive stone cliff dwellings in the American Southwest around 900 BCE. At the same time, thousands of miles away, the Arawak and Taino settled the island of Puerto Rico, and way out in the Pacific, completely isolated island civilizations were being established in Hawaii by Tahitian explorers around 1200 CE. We're talking multiple, entirely independent traditions taking root across wildly different geographies. Which brings us to Section 4, Early European Colonization, Overlapping Ways of Arrival. So European arrival wasn't just a single isolated event. It was a rapid collision of global influences. We see evidence of Norse exploration, mentioned way back around 1075. Then the Spanish pushed heavily into Florida, Texas, and the Southwest. The Dutch established New Netherland right in the mid-Atlantic, followed by the French, and of course the British settlements in Jamestown in 1607 and Plymouth in 1620. Each group brought entirely new languages, political systems, and societal norms, layering them onto the continent. Now, we absolutely must note that this colonization brought unimaginable tragedy and severe disruption for Native American populations. The introduction of Eurasian diseases, things like smallpox and measles, was completely devastating. Lacking biological immunity to these foreign pathogens, indigenous populations suffered severe epidemics that tragically decimated their numbers and radically altered the complex societies that had, up until then, flourished for millennia.
Finally, Section 5, a multicreedal modern nation, the boomerang back to today.
So the crucial point is, bringing this all full circle, boomeranging back to today, the vast cultural diversity, overlapping migrations, and the myriad of political systems we just explored perfectly align with Deborah J. Schildkraut's modern empirical findings. Because our history is literally built on layers of totally different societies. No single measure of American identity can exist today. It is inherently a complex and, yes, sometimes contradictory set of norms that collectively make up Americanism. And this brilliantly illustrates our main takeaway. Schildkraut writes, most Americans, regardless of their ethnic or immigrant background, share this complex view of the norms that constitute American identity. And here is the paradox of it all. Despite the deep complexity, this shared, multicreedal perspective is exactly what unites us. We're bound together not by a single homogeneous origin, but by a shared understanding of our multiple traditions. So, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. When you look back at these overlapping timelines, the insanely diverse early inhabitants, and the later waves of global arrivals, how does your own family history fit into the multiple traditions theory? Every individual story is a vital thread in this massive American tapestry. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, guys. Keep exploring the history that shapes our world.